My name is Claire Turner, and at 52, I've spent most of my life giving everything I had to the people I loved. I was always the one who picked up the slack, the one who made sure everything was in order, and the one who showed up when no one else did. For over 30 years, I've worked as a high school teacher in my small town in Maine. Teaching was more than just a job for me. It was my calling. I poured my heart into helping my students, watching them grow and succeed, knowing that I was making a difference. But while I gave my all to my career, my family became my priority. It was a delicate balance between work, home, and life in general, and I did it all without ever complaining. I kept my house running smoothly, made sure the bills were paid, and tried to be the mother my children needed, even when it felt like they didn't appreciate it. My daughter, Emma, was the light of my life. I remember the day she was born like it was yesterday, her little fingers wrapping around mine, her big brown eyes looking up at me as if she trusted me to protect her from the world. For 24 years, I've devoted myself to her. I sacrificed so many of my own dreams to ensure that she had everything she needed. Whether it was late nights, helping her with homework, long weekends at soccer games, or those endless hours spent listening to her problems and offering advice, I was always there. I didn't mind. It was what mothers do, right? They give, they nurture, they put their children first. When Emma got engaged to Alex, I was overjoyed. I had always hoped she would find someone who would love her as much as I loved her. Wedding plans started quickly, and soon enough, we were in the midst of choosing venues, selecting flowers, and discussing catering options. I could feel the excitement in the air. Emma was getting married, and everything seemed to fall into place. I wanted nothing more than to be there for her on the most important day of her life. I spent weeks carefully planning my trip to Boston, where the wedding would be held, making sure everything was arranged for me to attend. I took time off from work, made sure I had the perfect dress, and set aside funds to cover my travel expenses and any last-minute costs. In fact, I had already contributed $25,000 to the wedding, a substantial amount that I had saved over the years by cutting back on personal luxuries. I didn't mind. It was her special day, and I wanted to be a part of it, to witness her joy, to see her walk down the aisle. But that morning, as I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee in front of me, scrolling through the details for the wedding, I saw something that stopped me cold. I had just opened my email, expecting another update from Emma about the wedding plans, when I saw her name in bold letters. A strange unease settled in the pit of my stomach as I clicked on the message. At first, I didn't understand what I was reading. The words felt so detached, so impersonal. Dear Claire, after speaking with Alex and his family, we've decided it would be best if you watch the wedding from home via live stream. We feel it would be more intimate for everyone involved. We've already made arrangements for you to view it online. We understand this is not ideal, but we think it's the best solution. Best regards, Emma. The coldness of it hit me like a slap in the face. No, Mom, no, I love you. Just an email. A decision made for me without my input or consideration. I sat there staring at the screen, unable to process it. All I could think was, I've given everything for her. How could she do this to me? I had spent so many years making sacrifices, working overtime to pay for her college, helping her with everything she needed, supporting her through breakups and personal struggles. I had given her my time, my money, and my heart. And this was how she repaid me? By telling me in an email that I couldn't even be there for the one moment I had dreamed of, her wedding. It wasn't the uninvitation that hurt the most. It was the indifference, the lack of respect for all I had done for her. And yet, there was no anger in me, at least not at first. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. Instead, I felt numb. I put my phone down, stood up, and walked to the window, looking out at the snowy yard. The trees outside were bare, their branches stark against the pale sky. In the distance, I saw my neighbor Karen walking her dog, her breath coming out in small clouds as she trudged through the snow. I envied her simple peace. I returned to my phone and sent a quick message to Emma. Enjoy your day. I didn't expect a reply. I didn't want one. I knew what I had to do, but I didn't know how I was going to face it. How could I let her treat me this way? The silence that followed was deafening. After I sent Emma that short, emotionless text, I placed my phone on the counter and tried to go on with my day, as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. Every part of me wanted to rage, to demand answers, to make her see the hurt she'd caused. But I didn't. I didn't respond to her voicemails, to her desperate calls. It wasn't because I didn't care. I did, more than anything. It was because I had spent a lifetime giving in to the needs of everyone around me, and I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep letting people treat me like I was invisible, like my sacrifices meant nothing. I made my way through the rest of my morning, trying to focus on work. I sat at my desk, marking papers and preparing lessons for the week. The familiar rhythm of teaching was something that always kept me grounded, but today it felt hollow. I couldn't stop thinking about the email, about how the woman I had loved and cared for so deeply had written me off, like I was some distant acquaintance, someone she had no connection to. How had we gotten here? I had been the one who drove her to soccer practices, who stayed up late talking about her future, who helped her navigate life's ups and downs. And now, when it mattered most, I was nothing more than a spectator, watching my daughter's most important day from behind a screen. At lunch, I met Sarah, a colleague from the school's history department, for a quick coffee. She'd gone through a similar experience with her son a few years back. Her words were comforting, but they also stung because I realized just how much I had sacrificed for my own children without ever asking for anything in return. We talked about how motherhood had always been about giving, about putting others first, but how that had left us both feeling like shadows of the women we once were. Sarah had spent years being the perfect mother, only to be cast aside when her son grew older and needed less from her. She had been there for him, just as I had been there for Emma. But as we shared stories, I realized that both of us had spent too much time catering to others at the expense of ourselves. The evening, as I sat on the couch with a glass of wine in my hand, I thought about the $50,000 I had planned to transfer to the wedding fund. It wasn't just about the money. It was the principle. I had worked so hard for every penny I earned, cutting corners and forgoing luxuries to make sure my children had everything they needed. I had scrimped and saved, spent sleepless nights worrying about their futures. And now, here I was, being told I wasn't welcome. It wasn't even about not attending the wedding anymore. It was about the disrespect, the casual dismissal of everything I had done for Emma. The next day, I called my bank manager, John, to cancel the transfer. He seemed a bit surprised at my request, and I could hear the hesitation in his voice when he asked if I was sure. Of course, I was sure. In that moment, I knew I was doing the right thing, but the weight of it still pressed down on me. John assured me that the transfer hadn't gone through yet, so it would be simple enough to stop it. As I hung up the phone, I felt something shift within me. It wasn't relief, exactly, but more of a quiet acknowledgement that I had taken control of my own life for once. I was no longer going to allow myself to be a tool for others to use. I had been the one to make every sacrifice, every concession for the sake of my family. But that part of me, the part that had been giving without regard for her own needs, was done. When I came home later that evening, I turned off my phone. Emma had left dozens of messages, each one more frantic than the last. I didn't want to listen to them. I didn't want to hear her excuses or her pleas for me to change my mind. I knew she was upset, but I had to protect myself now. I had to stop letting my emotions be a commodity for her to manipulate. The next morning, I finally checked my messages, knowing that I couldn't keep avoiding the inevitable. As expected, Emma had called again, and so had my son, Ryan. I listened to one of Emma's voicemails, her voice trembling with frustration. "Mom, why are you doing this? I need you there. I don't know what to do without you." I listened to it, but I didn't respond. Instead, I set my phone down, feeling a strange calm come over me. Maybe it was the wine, or maybe it was just the relief of finally standing my ground. But I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt numb. I couldn't keep giving. Not this time. Not for something that should have been my moment to enjoy, to celebrate. That weekend, I spent time reflecting, slowly coming to terms with my choices. I had always done everything for everyone else. Now it was time for me to focus on myself. And when Emma finally reached out, begging me to reconsider, I knew what I had to do. It wasn't about making her understand. It was about finally understanding myself. I had spent too many years putting my needs last. It was time to let go of the guilt, time to stop apologizing for prioritizing myself. As I walked around the quiet house, a sense of peace began to settle within me. I had finally drawn a line, and now I could begin to rebuild, to reclaim the parts of me that I had given away without a second thought. It wasn't until I woke up the next morning that the reality of my decisions truly hit me. I had been so focused on protecting myself in the moment, on stopping the endless cycle of giving without receiving, that I hadn't fully processed what this all meant. I thought of Emma, and then I thought of Ryan, and the weight of the silence between us all pressed down on me. In some ways, I had prepared myself for this estrangement, but in others, it felt like a quiet heartbreak. I spent the next few days with my phone off, refusing to let the constant barrage of missed calls and text messages invade my space. I knew Emma was hurting, and I could almost hear the desperation in her voice every time she left a message. I had always been there for her, and I knew this decision would change everything between us. But I also knew I couldn't go back to how things had been, to being the mother who gave endlessly without ever getting anything in return. I didn't want to feel guilty. I didn't want to be manipulated into changing my mind because that was what I had done so many times before, caved to their needs because I couldn't bear to see them upset. But the truth was, I had never been given the chance to simply exist without being needed, without being the emotional or financial crutch for everyone else. And now, for the first time in decades, I could feel the weight of it lifting, if only just a little. The silence at home felt different now. It was no longer just the quiet of my empty house, it was the quiet of independence. For the first time in years, I wasn't filling my days with obligations to others. I was filling them with my own needs, my own thoughts. And as I spent more time reflecting on my choices, I realized how much of my identity had been wrapped up in being a mother, a caretaker, someone who put everyone else first. I had lost sight of who I was outside of those roles. The woman who had dreams beyond the family, who had desires and ambitions that had long been tucked away in the corners of my mind, was finally starting to reappear. That evening, I went for a walk in the cold, crisp air. The streets of our small town were quiet, the snow still fresh from earlier that morning, making everything look peaceful and pristine. I had always enjoyed walking when I needed to think, and tonight, I needed it more than ever. As I walked, I thought about the times Emma had called me to tell me about her successes, her challenges, her heartbreaks. I had always been the one to listen, the one to provide advice, support, and at times money. But now I realized I had been giving so much of myself away that I had nothing left for me. And if I was going to heal, if I was going to grow, I needed to take a step back, to let my children learn to rely on themselves instead of on me. The evening was peaceful, and as I turned back toward home, I felt a strange sense of relief. I was still unsure about how Emma would respond to my decision, but I knew deep down that I was doing the right thing. This wasn't about punishing her or making her suffer. It was about teaching both of us that love doesn't have to be unconditional when it comes at the cost of your own dignity and happiness. I loved Emma more than anything, but I had to stop letting her walk all over me. Stop letting her manipulate me into thinking I wasn't worthy of respect. When I returned home, I sat down with a cup of tea, watching the flickering flames in the fireplace. The warmth of the fire made the house feel more inviting, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. I wasn't just waiting for Emma to call or text anymore. I wasn't waiting for some magical resolution where everything would go back to how it was. No, this was different. I was reclaiming my space, my identity. And though the process was painful, it was also freeing. The next morning, I decided to check my messages. There were several from Emma and a few from Ryan, all with different tones of frustration, confusion, and sadness. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the screen for a moment. Should I call her back? Should I try to explain myself? I wasn't sure I could handle another confrontation, another emotional plea. Instead, I composed a simple message. Emma, I know this is hard, but I need you to understand why I made the decision I did. I can't keep giving without regard for myself. I love you, but I've spent years putting everyone else first. It's time for me to focus on my own well-being. I hope you understand. I read it over a few times, unsure if it was enough, unsure if she would even read it, but I pressed send and put the phone down. For the first time, I didn't feel an overwhelming sense of guilt. I didn't feel like I had to explain myself or apologize for my choices. This was my life, my future, and I wasn't going to let anyone, least of all my daughter, make me feel small for choosing to take care of myself. The days passed slowly, each one stretching into the next, and the weight of the silence between Emma and me grew heavier. I hadn't heard from her since I sent that message, and while part of me expected an apology or a heartfelt plea, the other part of me knew better. I had been there for her all her life, filling the role of the ever-giving mother, always putting her needs first. But this time, I wasn't just going to forgive her because I felt guilty or because I was afraid of being alone. No, this time was different. I had finally set a boundary, and no amount of guilt or regret was going to make me go back on it. Emma's absence in my life felt surreal. For years, my days had revolved around her needs, her wants, her goals. I'd been the one to comfort her when things went wrong, to celebrate her victories, big and small. But now, the absence of her voice, the silence where her laughter and complaints once filled the air, felt like an uncomfortable void. And though I didn't regret my decision, it didn't make the emptiness any easier to bear. That Saturday, as I sat in my living room, reading a book I hadn't had the time to open in years, I felt the weight of my choices. It wasn't that I missed her presence so much, as it was the realization that I had given everything for so long without expecting anything in return. All these years, I had put myself last, thinking it was what a mother should do, thinking it was my duty. But now I knew better. I had to stop. I had to learn to live for myself, not for anyone else. Later that evening, as I poured a glass of wine, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Something was about to break, and I wasn't sure if it would be Emma, if it would be me, or if it would be our entire relationship. I had done what I needed to do for my own healing, but the storm hadn't passed yet. As if on cue, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen and saw Emma's name flash across the display. I hesitated, letting the phone ring 3 times before I finally answered. I wasn't sure what she was going to say, or if she was even ready to have the kind of conversation that needed to happen, but I was ready to listen. Mom, her voice cracked, raw and desperate. Please, I need you to understand. I'm sorry for everything. I don't know how to fix this. I made a mistake. A huge mistake. I took a deep breath. I had waited for this moment. But now that it was here, I didn't know how to respond. Emma, I know you're sorry, but it's not just about the mistake. It's about everything that led to this. You've been taking me for granted for years, and I've let you. I've let everyone take from me without ever thinking about what I needed. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and I could hear her breathing, as if she was trying to process my words. I know, she whispered. I've been so selfish. But please, Mom, the wedding is falling apart. Alex's family is furious, and we're losing everything. We need the money, and we need you there. I can't do this without you. The words stung. Not because I didn't care, but because I had spent so long being the one who fixed everything, who made sure everyone was happy. And now, when I needed to be seen, to be valued for who I was, instead of just what I could give, Emma was asking for more. No, Emma, I said, my voice steady but firm. I won't be there. Not like this. You've made your choice, and now you need to live with the consequences. I can't keep enabling this behavior. You have to learn that my love isn't unconditional when it comes at the cost of my own self-respect. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and I could almost feel the tension between us, like a thread pulled too tight. So, that's it, she asked, her voice breaking. You're just gonna let everything fall apart? I closed my eyes, trying to find the words. It's not about letting things fall apart, Emma. It's about me finally choosing to put myself first. I've spent too many years letting everyone else take from me. I can't keep doing that. She let out a sob, and for a moment I felt a pang in my chest. But I knew I couldn't give in. I couldn't go back to being the person who was always there for everyone else while ignoring my own needs. I'm sorry, she whispered again, the words barely audible. I don't know what to do. I took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. The only thing you can do is face the consequences of your actions. We can't go back, Emma, but maybe, someday, we can build something new. Something where I'm not just a tool to fix things. The silence that followed felt heavy, and for the first time, I realized that I wasn't just letting Emma go. I was letting go of the version of myself that had been defined by her needs. I was letting go of the woman who had spent her life playing the role of the self-sacrificing mother, the one who was always there to make things right. I had to let go, not just for her, but for me. I love you, I said quietly, but this is where I draw the line. And with that, I ended the call. As I sat in the quiet of my living room, I realized something important. I was no longer trapped in the cycle of giving without receiving. I was free. For the first time in years, I could breathe. And while the future of my relationship with Emma was uncertain, I knew one thing for sure. I would no longer lose myself in the process of loving her. The days that followed felt like an emotional battlefield. I kept my phone turned off for most of the time, unsure of whether I could handle the flood of texts and calls that would inevitably come. Emma, Ryan, even Alex, everyone was trying to reach me. They were all looking for some kind of resolution, but I had no answers. I had made my choice, and for once, I wasn't going to back down. It was painful, more painful than I had expected, but I knew that this was the price I had to pay for my own peace. I tried to keep myself busy, but the house felt quieter than it ever had. The familiar noise of family life was gone, replaced by an uncomfortable stillness. I spent my days working, meeting with colleagues, and doing the things I normally did, but there was always that underlying heaviness, that gnawing sense that everything was changing. And the truth was, I was scared. Not of being alone. I had been alone for years in many ways, but scared of what this decision meant for the future. What if Emma and I couldn't rebuild our relationship? What if I had made a mistake? One evening, I was sitting in my living room, staring at the fire, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment I considered ignoring it, but something inside me told me that this moment was inevitable. It was time for the conversation I had been dreading, the one where I had to face the full extent of the fallout from my decision. I opened the door, and there stood Ryan, my son, looking more uncomfortable than I had ever seen him. His shoulders were tense, his hands shoved into the pockets of his jacket as if bracing for something difficult. "Mom," he said quietly, stepping past me into the living room without waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk." I closed the door behind him, trying to gather myself. I had been avoiding this conversation, knowing that it was coming, but I didn't know if I was ready to hear what he had to say. I had never been good at conflict, especially not with my children. I wanted to be the mother who was always there, always forgiving, always understanding. But that woman was gone now. She had to be. "What's going on, Ryan?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He ran a hand through his dark hair, his eyes shifting nervously. "Nat's freaking out, Mom," he said, his voice tight. "She's calling everyone, trying to make sense of what happened. You need to help her." I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped my lips. "Help her? After everything, you're asking me to help her?" Ryan's face softened, but his voice remained firm. "Look, I get it. I do. You've been hurt, and I understand why you're upset. But she's still your daughter, and you're still her mother. This is tearing her apart, and I don't know how to fix it. You're the only one who can. She needs you." I felt a sharp pang in my chest. The truth was, I still loved Emma. Despite everything, I wanted to be there for her, but not at the cost of losing myself. Not at the cost of continuing to be the emotional punching bag for my family. I took a deep breath and said, "Ryan, I've spent my whole life making sure everyone else was happy, but I can't keep doing it. Not like this. Not anymore. I've given so much of myself, and I have nothing left. I'm not just some resource for you all to tap into when it's convenient." Ryan shifted uncomfortably, as if my words had hit him harder than he expected. "But Mom, this is different. You can't just walk away from your own daughter. She's asking for your help. The wedding's falling apart. You can't just let it go." I looked at him, my heart heavy. "I'm not walking away from her, Ryan, but I'm also not going to let her continue treating me like I don't matter. I've been taken for granted for too long, and this is where I draw the line." Ryan's face was conflicted, torn between his loyalty to his sister and the growing understanding of my feelings. "I didn't know it was this bad, Mom," he said quietly. "I always thought you'd just keep going, you know? You never said anything." I stood up, walking to the window and looking out at the dark, snowy yard. I didn't say anything because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. I thought that was my role, my job as a mother. But I've spent so many years giving, and in the end, I've been left with nothing. I'm tired, Ryan. I'm tired of being the person who always puts others first. There was a long pause. Ryan didn't know how to respond, and for the first time, I realized he probably hadn't even considered the emotional toll it had taken on me all these years. They had always expected me to be strong, to always be there no matter what it cost me. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, his voice softer now. "I never realized. I should have seen it." I shook my head. "It's not your fault, Ryan. It's not about blame. It's about me finally choosing to take care of myself. And if Emma can't understand that, then maybe we both need time to figure things out." Ryan nodded slowly, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret and understanding. "I get it now. I just didn't want to see you hurt." "I know," I replied, my voice quieter. "But sometimes the only way to heal is to set boundaries, even when it's painful. I can't keep being the person everyone expects me to be." Ryan sighed, looking down at the floor, clearly wrestling with the weight of what I was saying. I guess we'll have to figure this out on our own now. But I think you're right. Maybe we've all been taking you for granted." I could feel the shift in him. He wasn't fully on board with my decision, but he was beginning to understand. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone in this. I wasn't just the person who sacrificed everything for her children. I was a woman who had needs, who had a voice, and who deserved to be heard. "I'm not asking for perfection, Ryan," I said softly. "I'm just asking for respect, for all of us." He nodded again, his face showing a mixture of relief and sadness. "I'll tell Emma, but she needs to see it too. You can't be the only one giving anymore, Mom." I smiled faintly. "No, I can't, and I won't." And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally stepping into the life I was meant to live. One where I mattered too. The days that followed felt like a strange limbo. The air between Emma and me remained thick with unspoken words, and though I had set my boundaries, part of me still couldn't shake the feeling of dread that lingered. Emma's silence had been the loudest message of all. She hadn't reached out again after that last call, and I hadn't made any effort to contact her either. It felt like a shift in the entire foundation of our relationship, as if the ground beneath us had cracked, and we were both waiting to see if we would fall or somehow rebuild. I kept my distance. My phone stayed off for the most part, except for the occasional message from Ryan. He tried to check in, but I could tell he was walking on eggshells, unsure of how to navigate this new reality. He didn't fully understand everything that had led me to this point, but I could tell he was beginning to see things from my perspective. He was trying to walk the fine line between supporting his sister and respecting my choices. That meant more than I was ready to admit. I spent more time at work, focusing on my students and my classes. The routine of grading papers, meeting with colleagues, and attending school events kept my mind occupied. I had always taken pride in being a dedicated teacher, but it felt different now. For the first time in years, I didn't just feel like a vessel for everyone else's needs. I felt like a person again. It was a strange, liberating feeling. At first, I couldn't quite shake the guilt, but over time, it softened. I was giving myself permission to breathe. But still, there was this ache in my chest. I knew it wasn't just about the wedding or the money. It was about the years of self-neglect, the years of giving and giving until there was nothing left for me. And the worst part? I hadn't even realized how much I had lost myself in the process. I hadn't noticed how much I had changed, or rather, how I had allowed others to change me. The woman I had been, the woman I still wanted to be, had been buried beneath decades of expectations. The night of the rehearsal dinner, I was sitting on the couch, staring out at the snow-covered yard, when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Ryan, asking if I was planning to attend the wedding the next day. I stared at the text for a long time, wondering how to respond. What was I supposed to say? I had made it clear that I wouldn't be attending, But part of me still wondered if this would be the moment when Emma would finally realize what she had done and reach out with a heartfelt apology. But when I didn't respond right away, Ryan sent another text. Mom, she's a mess. You know that, right? This whole thing is falling apart and it's tearing her apart. She's lost the venue, and the caterers are threatening to pull out if they don't get the deposit by morning. I felt a tightening in my chest. I didn't want to feel sorry for her. Not anymore. Emma had made her choices, and she had to live with them. But that motherly instinct kicked in, the one that had always been there, always ready to fix things. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. I knew if I did, I'd be pulled right back into the role I had spent so long trying to escape. The next morning, as I sipped my coffee, I glanced at my phone. There were a dozen missed calls, a string of texts from both Ryan and Emma. One message from Emma caught my attention. I'm so sorry, Mom. Please, I need you. I don't know what to do. Alex and I are desperate. We're losing everything. Please, I can't do this without you. I sat there, staring at the message. Part of me wanted to reach out. Part of me wanted to make everything okay. But then I remembered everything. Every late-night conversation I had spent listening to her complaints, every sacrifice I had made. I remembered the email that had shattered everything. I remembered the cold, detached words that made me feel like nothing more than a means to an end. And just like that, I felt the wave of guilt subside. No, I couldn't do it. I couldn't just sweep this under the rug, pretend like nothing had happened. I had to stay strong. For myself. For the first time, I wasn't going to let my emotions be manipulated. I wasn't going to fix this. I turned my phone off, made another cup of coffee, and went outside for a walk in the crisp morning air. The snow crunched beneath my boots, the world still and quiet around me. There was a certain peace in the solitude. I didn't have to be anyone's savior today. I didn't have to apologize for putting myself first. For once, I was just me, Claire Turner, not the mother, not the fixer, not the emotional crutch. When I returned home, I finally picked up my phone and saw that Emma had left a voicemail. I listened to it with a heavy heart. Mom, I don't understand why you're doing this. Please, I need you there tomorrow. I'm sorry, I just wanted everything to be perfect. I closed my eyes, holding my breath for a moment before sending a simple reply. I'm not coming, Emma. You made your choice, and now you have to live with the consequences. I hit send, feeling both lighter and heavier at the same time. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt resolute. I didn't know what would come next. I didn't know if Emma and I would ever truly heal from this. But for the first time, I felt like I was standing on my own 2 feet. And that, in itself, was enough. The following days were some of the hardest I had ever faced. The silence between Emma and me grew even more suffocating, and though I had taken the step to protect myself, there was a constant ache in my chest. Every time I thought about her, about the girl I had raised, the woman she had become, I felt a tug of regret. Not because I thought I had made the wrong decision, but because it was clear that the distance between us wasn't just emotional. It was as though an invisible wall had been built between us, one that I wasn't sure how to dismantle. The wedding came and went, as weddings tend to do. I didn't know all the details. I hadn't seen any photos, hadn't heard from Emma directly, except for the occasional message from Ryan. He continued to try to bridge the gap between us, updating me on what was happening, but I could tell he was struggling with the fallout of the situation. He had always been caught between us, but now he seemed to carry a burden of his own, one that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with his sister's choices. The night after the wedding, I received another voicemail from Emma. I knew it was coming, but I hadn't been ready for the rawness in her voice when I listened. Mom, she started, her voice shaky. I don't know how to do this without you. I don't understand why you did what you did, but I need you to know I'm sorry. I should have never let it get this far. I don't expect you to come back and fix everything. I don't know what I expect. I miss you, and I'm scared of losing you forever. I let the voicemail linger in my mind for a few minutes before I composed myself. I had been holding on to the belief that I had made the right choice, that I had stood firm for my own well-being. But hearing Emma's voice like that, broken and vulnerable, made my heart ache. I had always been the one to fix things, to make everything better, but this time it felt different. I had fixed things by stepping away, by refusing to let myself be the perpetual sacrifice. But did that mean I had to lose her forever? Did it mean I had to lose my daughter to the same stubbornness that had driven us apart in the first place? I sat down at my desk, my hand hovering over the phone for a long time. What should I do? Should I reach out? Should I try to bridge the gap, or should I hold my ground? The decision felt too big, too final. But in the silence of my home, I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer the woman who would hide behind apologies for setting boundaries. I had to do what was right for me, even if that meant taking a step back from her for a while. Finally, I decided to respond. I composed a message, my fingers shaking slightly as I typed. Emma, I heard your message. I'm not angry with you. I'm disappointed, but I'm not angry. I made the choice I did because I needed to. For the first time in years, I'm learning to prioritize myself. I love you, but I can't be the only one who gives in this relationship. I don't know what comes next, but I hope we can find a way to move forward, eventually. I sent the message and set my phone down, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. It wasn't a perfect response, but it was honest. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't writing it to placate her or fix the situation. I was writing it to share my truth. The next few days were filled with a quiet sort of tension. I didn't hear back from Emma immediately, and part of me wondered if that would be the last time we spoke. Maybe this was the end of our story. Maybe, despite everything, I had finally severed the bond that had once been the most important part of my life. But then, a week later, the unexpected happened. I got a call from Ryan, and though I had learned to manage the flood of emotions that came with this situation, I could hear the weariness in his voice. Mom, Emma wants to talk to you. She's ready to listen, finally. She says she's been doing some thinking. I didn't know what to say at first. A part of me wanted to jump at the chance to fix everything, to make everything go back to normal, but I knew better now. I had learned that normal wasn't always what was best for me, and yet I couldn't ignore the pull of motherly love. The hope that maybe, just maybe, this would be the beginning of the healing process for both of us. I'm not sure I'm ready to talk to her yet, Ryan, I said softly. It's not about fixing things immediately. It's about understanding that things can't just go back to how they were. Not for me. Ryan sighed, a mix of frustration and understanding in his tone. I know, Mom. I know, but she's asking for a chance. She wants to find a way back. And so do I. I just think maybe we can all find a way to start over, to understand each other better. I stayed silent for a moment, letting the words settle in. This wasn't just about Emma anymore. This was about me, about my growth, and about the relationship I had with both of my children. It was never going to be easy, but perhaps it didn't need to be all or nothing. Maybe there was room for both boundaries and love. All right, I said, my voice steady now. Tell her I'll talk to her. But this time, it's on my terms. I'm not going to go back to what was. Ryan's voice softened, and I could almost feel the relief on the other end of the line. I think that's what she's hoping for, Mom. I really do. I hung up the phone, taking a deep breath. For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was the beginning of something new for all of us. Maybe with time, we could rebuild what had been broken, but only if we all took the time to truly understand each other. And as I sat in my quiet house, the snow falling outside, I realized that the hardest part was over. The hardest part had been letting go of the version of myself that had always been there to please everyone else. The hardest part had been finding the courage to step into the unknown, to step into a future where I mattered just as much as anyone else. Now, I was ready to face whatever came next, on my own terms. The day I agreed to talk to Emma, something shifted inside me. I had been living in a kind of limbo, uncertain of whether I was doing the right thing, hesitant about what my decision might mean for my future with her. But as the days passed, I realized I wasn't just changing the course of our relationship, I was changing myself. And that, more than anything, was what I needed. I didn't hear from Emma immediately after my conversation with Ryan, and in some ways, that was a relief. It gave me the space to prepare. The woman who had spent her life bending to everyone's will, constantly putting herself second, was no longer there. Instead, there was this new version of me, stronger, more self aware, and not afraid to take up space. It felt almost foreign, but in the best way. When the phone rang and I saw Emma's name flash across the screen, my stomach fluttered, but I didn't hesitate to answer. I was ready, or at least I was ready to try. "Hi, Mom." Her voice sounded fragile, but there was a sincerity in it that I hadn't heard before. "I'm sorry. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how much I was hurting you." I sat down on the couch, my hands trembling slightly, but I took a deep breath and steadied myself. "I know, Emma, but that's not the point anymore. It's not just about you apologizing, it's about us understanding each other." There was a pause on the other end. I could feel her thinking, processing my words. "I know. I've been so selfish. I didn't even realize how much you've always given and how little I've appreciated it. I thought I could fix everything, but all I've done is push you away. And I'm sorry." Her words were raw, vulnerable, and they hit me in a place I wasn't expecting. I had spent so much of my life being the one to listen to her apologies, to fix things when they went wrong. I realized, as I sat there in the quiet of my living room, that for the first time, I wasn't the one trying to make everything better. I wasn't the one apologizing for standing up for myself. "I appreciate your apology, Emma," I said, my voice steady, "but it's going to take time. Time for both of us. I need you to understand something. I've always been there for you, but I've never asked for anything in return. I've spent years putting my needs aside because I thought that's what mothers do. But now I'm not doing that anymore." There was a long silence. I could hear her breathing, but she didn't speak for a while. Finally, she whispered, "I understand, Mom. I've been selfish. I didn't see it before, but I do now. And I'm not asking you to forgive me immediately. I just want to start over, if you can." I felt a lump form in my throat, but I pushed it down. "We'll figure it out, Emma, but this time it's going to be different. I'm not going to give and give without taking care of myself. That's the lesson I've learned through all of this, and I need you to respect that." There was a softness in her voice when she spoke again. "I can respect that, Mom. I'm sorry I hurt you. I know I've taken you for granted, but I don't want to anymore. I want to rebuild what we had, even if it takes time." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "It will take time, Emma, and it's going to be hard, but I'm willing to try if you are." The conversation ended with a promise. Not a promise that everything would go back to the way it was, but a promise that we would try to build something new, something healthier, a relationship based on mutual respect, not one where I was constantly bending over backward to fix things. I sat back in my chair, the weight of the conversation settling in. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had taken control of my own life, my own future. I wasn't waiting for things to be fixed by someone else. I was fixing them for myself. And maybe, just maybe, I was beginning to heal. The days after that conversation were quiet, but they felt different. Emma and I didn't talk every day, but there was a shift in our communication. She started reaching out more, asking about my day, sharing little things from her life. We were learning to find our footing again, and while it was slow, it felt right. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for someone else's approval. I wasn't waiting to be needed or validated. I was living for myself, and it was a freedom I had never known. As I sat on my porch one evening, looking out at the sunset, I realized that I was finally living for the woman I had always been. Someone strong, someone capable of setting boundaries, and someone worthy of respect. And though the road ahead would still be challenging, I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer just a mother, a caretaker, a provider. I was Claire Turner, and that was enough. The days after Emma and I finally spoke again felt like a gradual unfolding, like a new chapter of a book I hadn't planned to write. Each day was a step forward, but it also carried the weight of the past, of everything that had brought us to this point. The silence that had once been heavy and oppressive between us was beginning to feel lighter, but it wasn't gone. Not yet. And honestly, I wasn't sure if it would ever fully dissipate. The space we had carved out for ourselves, for our separate healing, still had gaps. But for the first time in years, I wasn't trying to fill them with things that weren't mine to carry. I spent most of my time focusing on myself, just as I had promised. There was a strange freedom in that. Freedom that came from not being tethered to everyone else's expectations of who I should be or what I should give. For so long, I had lived in a constant state of for them, for Emma, for Ryan, for my students, for everyone who needed me, even when I had nothing left to give. But now I was living for me. I was waking up to the sound of birds outside my window, not the buzzing of my phone. I was spending my evenings reading or taking walks or just sitting in silence, something I hadn't allowed myself to do in so long. It was uncomfortable at first, this silence, but as time went on, it became something I welcomed. One morning, as I was sitting with my coffee looking out at the quiet street, my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, but something told me it was important. It was Emma. I took a deep breath before answering, not knowing what to expect. "Hi, Mom." Her voice sounded steadier this time, more grounded. "I just wanted to check in. I know it's been a while, but I've been doing a lot of thinking." I felt the familiar tug in my chest. Part of me wanted to run back to the old patterns, to be the mom she needed me to be, to apologize for setting boundaries. But I resisted. This was different. I was different, and that meant our relationship needed to be different too. "I'm glad you're thinking about things, Emma," I said softly. "But I'm not the person I was before. I'm not the one who sacrifices herself over and over again. I've learned that the hard way, and I'm not going back to that." She was quiet for a moment, and I could almost hear her processing my words. "I understand, Mom. I really do. I'm sorry for everything. I didn't realize how much I took you for granted until you stepped back. And I've been thinking about how I've always relied on you to fix everything, to make it all better. I thought I was helping by trying to protect you from everything, but I see now that it was selfish." Her apology, though expected, still hit me harder than I anticipated. It wasn't about the wedding or the money. It was about the years of her needing me in ways that, for too long, I had allowed. She needed to see me as a person, not a solution. And I needed to see her as someone who could handle things on her own, someone who could stand up for herself and make decisions that weren't solely based on pleasing others. "I'm proud of you, Emma," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm proud that you're thinking about this, but you need to know that I can't be the person who fixes things for you anymore. Not because I don't love you, but because love means teaching you how to handle things on your own, even when it's hard." There was a long silence, and I could feel her absorbing what I was saying. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, but there was a calmness in it that I hadn't heard in a long time. "I know, and I don't expect you to fix anything for me anymore. I want to rebuild what we had, but I understand it's going to take time. I'm ready for that." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Time is all we have, Emma, and I'm willing to take it one step at a time, but you have to meet me halfway. I can't keep carrying all the weight, and you can't keep pretending like everything's fine when it's not." She agreed. We both knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were too many years of neglect, of taking each other for granted, to just magically fix everything. But that didn't mean it couldn't get better. It just meant that we had to work at it. Both of us. After we hung up, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was progress. We weren't where we used to be, and that was okay. I had done the hard part. I had set the boundaries, I had shown up for myself, and I had finally learned that my needs mattered too. The next few weeks were filled with small steps forward. Emma and I talked more often, but now it was different. We shared things with each other, but we also respected the space we needed to grow. She had her life, and I had mine. But we were starting to build a new relationship, one based on mutual respect, understanding, and trust. I wasn't her emotional crutch anymore, and that was a relief for both of us. In the quiet moments of my days, as I sat in the stillness of my home, I realized something important. I was no longer waiting for someone to validate me. I had learned to validate myself. And in doing so, I had learned that healing doesn't come from fixing others. It comes from fixing yourself first. And that, more than anything, was the beginning of true peace. I didn't know what the future held for Emma and me, or how our relationship would continue to evolve. But I knew one thing. I had taken control of my own life, and no matter what happened, I was finally living for me. and that was enough. A month passed before I truly started to feel like I could breathe again. Life had a quiet rhythm to it, one that I had found for myself, away from the emotional chaos I had spent so many years drowning in. I had become used to the calm, the space I had carved out in my life. For the first time, I could hear my own thoughts, my own desires, without the constant noise of needing to fix things for others. But that didn't mean everything was perfect. There were still days where the ache for my children's approval crept in, or when I found myself wondering if I had made the right decision by setting such firm boundaries. But those moments were becoming fewer and farther between. I was starting to trust myself more, and that, in itself, felt like progress. It was a Sunday afternoon when the unexpected call came. I had just finished reading a book I'd been meaning to get through for months, and was enjoying the quiet stillness of my home when my phone buzzed. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, but something in my gut told me it was important. I didn't recognize the area code, but as I hesitated to pick it up, I realized it didn't matter. Whoever was on the other end would speak their truth, and I would decide whether to listen. I answered. "Hello," I said, my voice steady but curious. "Hi, Claire," a voice said on the other end. It took me a moment to place it, but when I did, my heart skipped a beat. It was Alex. "Alex?" I said, surprised but not upset. After everything, I hadn't expected him to reach out to me, but a part of me was glad to hear from him. "What's going on?" "I've been thinking about everything that's happened," Alex said, his voice more hesitant than usual. "About the wedding, about Emma, about you. And I realized I never really apologized to you for my part in all this. I didn't see it at the time, but I see it now. I'm sorry, Claire." The words hit me harder than I expected. Here was the person I had once resented for being the catalyst in Emma's decision to exclude me. But hearing him speak this way with genuine remorse was something I didn't expect from him. I had always known Alex to be a bit more guarded, to lean on Emma's family for validation, but hearing him take responsibility for his actions shifted something within me. "I appreciate you saying that, Alex," I said softly. "But you don't need to apologize to me. This isn't just about the wedding or the money. This is about Emma and me learning how to have a real relationship, one that isn't built on expectations or me always being the one to sacrifice. You were a part of that decision, but it wasn't all your fault." He paused for a moment, almost as if he were processing what I said. "I know," he finally said, "but it's been hard, you know? I've been trying to make sense of everything, trying to figure out how I could have done things differently. And I just wanted to tell you that I see you now. I see what you've done for Emma, and I see how much it cost you." There it was. The acknowledgement I had longed for, not from Emma, but from someone else who had seen me for who I truly was, someone who recognized the depth of my sacrifices. It felt validating, like a piece of a puzzle I hadn't even realized was missing was finally slotted into place. "Thank you, Alex," I said, my voice softer now. "That means more to me than you know. I've spent so many years trying to make everything okay for everyone, but somewhere along the way I lost myself, and I'm finally learning to get her back." There was a silence between us, and then Alex spoke again, this time with a lightness to his voice I hadn't heard before. "I'm glad to hear that, Claire. I know Emma's been struggling with everything, but I think you've helped her more than you know. She's trying to be better, to be more independent, but she still has a lot to learn." "I know," I said with a sigh. "I'm not asking for perfection, Alex, but I do think we're starting to rebuild, one step at a time." "I hope so," he said quietly. "I really do. And Claire, I just wanted to say thank you for being honest with me, for being honest with Emma. You didn't have to do that. You didn't have to set those boundaries, but you did, and that takes courage." His words sat with me, settling deep in my chest. They weren't just an apology, they were an acknowledgement of my strength, my ability to stand firm when everything around me had been falling apart. For so long, I had felt like the one who was always holding things together, always picking up the pieces for others. But in that moment, Alex's words reminded me that I wasn't weak for setting boundaries. I was strong for having the courage to put myself first, and that, more than anything, was the hardest thing I'd ever done. "Thank you, Alex," I said, my voice steady again. "I think this conversation was something we both needed." "I agree," he said, his tone lighter. Take care of yourself, Claire, and don't hesitate to reach out if you ever need anything. I won't, I said, smiling softly to myself. I'll take care of myself. As I hung up the phone, I sat there for a moment, absorbing the weight of what had just happened. The walls I had put up, the boundaries I had drawn, were starting to make sense. This wasn't just about Emma and me. It was about me learning to live for myself, without guilt, without apologies. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right path. The road ahead would still be filled with challenges, but I knew I had the strength to face them. For the first time in years, I was living on my own terms. And that, more than anything, was enough. Life began to feel a little easier after that conversation with Alex. It wasn't that everything had magically fallen into place, but something shifted inside me. It was as if I had finally stepped into a version of myself that I had been running from for years. One that wasn't constantly wrapped up in others' needs. One that wasn't afraid to set boundaries and stand by them. And though I knew there was still work to be done, the process of healing had already started. Emma and I continued to talk more frequently, but these conversations were different. There was a raw honesty to them that I hadn't realized we had been missing all these years. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes there were awkward silences, times when the old patterns of codependency tried to creep back in. But for the first time, we were speaking on equal footing. It wasn't about me saving her. It wasn't about me fixing things. It was about us, as two people, trying to build a relationship based on respect, honesty, and love. One day, as I sat in my quiet house, the phone rang again. I hesitated for a moment, unsure if I was ready for another emotional conversation. But when I saw Emma's name on the screen, something inside me told me this was a good moment. Hey, Mom. Her voice sounded tentative, but there was a new softness in it. I've been thinking a lot about everything we've talked about, and I realized something important. I've always expected you to be the one to take care of everything. I didn't know how much I was asking of you until now. My heart clenched. I had heard her apology before, but this time it felt different, genuine, like she finally understood the depth of what I had been carrying. I know, sweetie, I replied softly, and I'm glad you're seeing it. But, Emma, I need you to understand something important. I've been taking care of everyone for so long, and somewhere along the way, I forgot about myself. I'm learning that I can't keep doing that. I can't keep giving everything without asking for something in return. There was silence on the other end for a moment, and when Emma spoke again, I could hear the shift in her tone. I get that, Mom. I really do, and I want to do better. I know it's going to take time, but I'm ready to work on it. I don't want to lose you. You're not going to lose me, Emma, I said, feeling a warmth spread through me that I hadn't felt in a long time. But you have to understand that I'm not the same person I was before. I can't go back to being the woman who always sacrifices herself. I won't do it, and you need to respect that. I do, she said quietly. I will. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry for everything, and I don't expect you to fix everything anymore. I'm ready to take responsibility for my own life. Her words, though simple, carried the weight of everything we had been through. She was finally seeing me, not just as her mother, but as a woman, a person with her own dreams, her own needs, and her own boundaries. And that realization, more than anything, was the turning point I had been waiting for. As we talked, I realized how far we had come in such a short time. It hadn't been easy, and it wasn't perfect. There were still moments when I felt the pull to go back to old habits, to give in to the old patterns of being the one who always made things better. But now, I was learning how to say no without guilt, how to give without losing myself in the process. And Emma was learning too. She was learning how to stand on her own, how to take responsibility for her own happiness, and how to love me without taking me for granted. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my living room, letting the conversation settle in. I was proud of both of us. Proud that we were finally talking honestly, that we were building a foundation that wasn't based on dependency or expectation. It wasn't going to be easy, and there were still times when I felt a twinge of guilt for putting myself first, but I knew this was the only way forward. I had started to take care of myself in ways I hadn't even realized were possible. I took walks every morning, something I had always enjoyed but never had time for. I started cooking meals just for me, something simple and nourishing, without worrying about everyone else's needs. I picked up hobbies I had set aside for years, like reading, painting, and gardening. It wasn't about being selfish, it was about reclaiming my own identity, the woman I had lost somewhere along the way. And it wasn't just about Emma, it was about Ryan too. As I began to take care of myself, I noticed a change in him as well. Our conversations became more meaningful, more connected. He stopped trying to fix everything for me, and instead, we shared our lives with each other. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time, I felt like I was truly living for myself, not just for others. The next month, Emma invited me to lunch. It was the first time we'd gotten together since the wedding debacle. We met at a quiet cafe, and as soon as I saw her, I knew things were different. She wasn't the same person she had been a few months ago. She was more confident, more sure of herself, and so was I. We didn't need to talk about the past. We both knew where we stood. We just enjoyed each other's company as two adults, no longer bound by old expectations or unhealthy patterns. As we talked, I realized something important. The road to healing wasn't about fixing what was broken, but about learning to walk side by side with mutual respect and understanding. It wasn't about the past, it was about moving forward together on our own terms. And in that moment, I knew I had made the right choice. Not just for me, but for her, for all of us. It wasn't a perfect road, but it was ours to walk, and that was enough. In life, it's essential to recognize that self-care is not selfish. It's necessary for our well-being. Often, we find ourselves sacrificing our own needs to please others, especially in our relationships. But true love and respect come from setting healthy boundaries. Don't be afraid to prioritize yourself, even when it feels uncomfortable or when others try to guilt you into giving more than you can afford. The people who truly care about you will respect your limits and appreciate you for who you are, not just what you can provide for them. It's important to understand that you can love others without losing yourself in the process. Building relationships based on mutual respect and understanding takes time, but it's worth the effort. The road to healing may not be easy, but it's necessary for personal growth. Don't let guilt or fear of rejection hold you back from living authentically. If you give everything you have without taking care of yourself, you risk losing who you are. So take the time to invest in yourself, recognize your own worth, and learn that true peace comes from living life on your own terms.